Shabbat Shemayim Kodash Hayashim Ka Ahaya Malak Wafka Thaba'a Ratizawan Kahaya Aisha Bahuratiza Kawa Haya Bashimayim Nathananawa Lacham Kayiwam Wasalak Nawa Kawabwath Nawa Kasalak Nawa Kawabwath Nawa Wala the Bayan Nawa Bashimayam Kudash Hayashim Ka Ahaya Malak Wathka Thaba'a Ratizawan Kahaya Aisha Baharatiza Koa Haya Bashimayam Nathananawa Lacham Kayiwam Wasalak Nawa Chawabwath Nawa Kasalak Nawa Chawabwath Nawa Wala the Bayan Nawa Banasaya Wanabal Hawashai Nawa Man Raikaya Laka Hamalak Wath Waha'ala Wahatha Pyrath Wa'ai Wailam Yam
Shabbat Shalom, Israel. First and foremost, we like to give thanks and praise to the Most High, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for this Sabbath day. We are True Heritage Ministries, and welcome to our Sabbath moment. I am your host, Kadar. Now, I'd like to share certain things about who we are. We, True Heritage Ministries, we're not a church, we're not a camp, and we're not a gathering. We are a production team that's going to continue to put out the understanding and do the work of the Most High according to the Bible to the 12 tribes of Israel that's been scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Our mission is to educate and give understanding of the Holy Scriptures. We have certain beliefs that I'd like to share with you. Okay? First and foremost, we believe in the Holy Scriptures, the Bible. We believe in the 5 books of Moses, what we call the Torah. We believe in the writings of our forefathers and the prophets that we call the Tanakh. We believe in the King James Version, the Apocrypha, which are the lost book of the Bible, or somebody called the hidden books. We also believe in the New Testament, the 5 books of the apostles. Also, the book of Revelation that is given to John the Revelator by Yeshua Mashiach. And we do read the letters and writings of Paul to the churches, of what we call the epistles. Also, we recognize the Most High as the Father of creation, and we call him Abanawa. That's what we call the Most High. And for Yeshua Mashiach, we recognize his name as such, Yeshua, not Jesus Christ. So those are some of the things that True Heritage Ministries we believe. And we will continue to use all forms of mechanism, all forms of platform to still put forth this truth and understanding of the Israelite culture, the Israelite spiritual society, the Israelite laws and commandments, and also the Israelite understanding of the socialism, and for us to reach a higher understanding towards a spiritual oneness. Today's lesson, we're going to go and discuss a bit about the Feast of Purim. Now, currently, we're in the, as you may call it in the Hebrew calendar, the 12th month, as is written in Scripture, the 12th month, which is called Adar. And usually the 12th month of the year, Israelites celebrate and give praises to the Feast of Purim. And normally we go into the book of Esther and we read the great works our Queen Benjamin's sister Esther had accomplished for the nation of Israel during the time of Persian captivity. Alright? But today's lesson, we're going to go more into Mordecai, the Benjamite Jew, the man behind the queen. Mordecai, we feel like, is a man that had a lot of accomplishment in the book of Esther. You find that there is so much to learn about the book of Esther through this man Mordecai, the Benjamite. We're going to go into a bit background of who Mordecai's family heritage, what was Mordecai's position during the time of Persian Medes, and what was his contribution to the elevation of Israel during the Persian captivity. So let's begin. If you can follow me, grab your Bibles, and we're going to go into the book of Esther. And we're going to start at the 2nd chapter, verse 5. And I will read. Now in Shushan, the palace, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Okay. So now we know Mordecai is the son of Shimei, who also is the son of Kish. Now, who are these two men? Well, we need to go back maybe like 2-3 generations before Mordecai and get a greater understanding of the two men. Okay. We're going to start off with the book of 1 Samuel, the 9th chapter, verse 1-3. Now there was a man of Benjamin, whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, the son of Zerah, the son of Bacharath, the son of Apahiah, a Benjamite, a mighty man of power. And he had a son whose name was Saul, a choice good man and a goodly. And there was not among the children of Israel. Now, so we see that Kish was the father of Saul. Saul had become Israelites' first king, Benjamin king, for the nation of Israel. Now I mentioned that Kish was a mighty man, meaning that Kish was a man that had huge substance. When you look into the Tanakh in different translations, he was a wealthy man. He was a high political figure in the land of Benjamin. Okay? So he was really a mighty man. He was the head of the royal family of Saul. That's who Kish is. Let us continue. We're going to go back. We're going to go back to Esther's second chapter. Now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish. Now we just went over who Kish was. Now we're going to go into who Shimei is. Okay? Shimei. Let's go into the book of 2 Samuel, the 16th chapter. I'm going to start at verse 5 to 6. And when David came to Bahurim, behold, thence came out a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera. He came forth and cursed still as he came. And he cast stones at David, and at all the servants of King David, and all the people, and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. So Shimei comes from the family of Saul. This is during the time when David had become king, okay, over Saul. Shimei came and he cursed David. As you continue to read, he calls him what? A bloody murder. Okay. Then he took stones and rocks and what? Threw it at David. He threw it at David's soldiers, his men, and David's servants. Now, his servants and his men wanted to eliminate him right then and there. But David, out of the kindness of his heart, refrained his men from killing Shimei because he dishonored the king. Okay, so David allowed Shimei to live. Right? Now let's move on to when Solomon was reigned king. Solomon was the son of King David. And we read 1 King, the 2nd chapter, verse 36-37. And the king sent, this is King Solomon, sent and called for Shimei. And he said unto him, build thee an house in Jerusalem, and dwell there, and go not forth thence anywhere, any whither. For it shall be that on the day thou goest out and passest over the brook Kidron, thou shalt know for certain that thou shalt surely die. Thy blood shall be upon thy own head. So Solomon gave him a warning. Okay, because Solomon has understanding of how he treated his father when he was ruling. David had told Solomon, when you read, watch Shimei. Shimei don't have love for the family. So Solomon gave him an opportunity to live by saying, build yourself a house, dwell there, but do not leave the providences. Solomon said, if you were to leave, then you will die. And that will be on you. Because I am making a law and a commandment with you right then and there. Eventually, as the story progresses, Shimei took it upon himself to leave the area. Solomon sent his military, capture Shimei, and killed him. Solomon warned him not to leave. This is Shimei. Now let's go back. So now in Shushan, in the palace, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, of Benjamin. So now we know that Mordecai was really the grandson of Shimei. Okay? Shimei and Saul were cousins. Kish was Saul's father. When you go more into the understanding, you find that Shimei's father and Saul's father were brothers. Kish has the title of a mighty man because he was the head of the royal family in a lot of Benjamin. Okay? But we find that Mordecai is the grandson or maybe the great-grandson of Shimei. Alright, let's continue. Esther, the second chapter, verse 6. Who had been carried, we're talking about Mordecai, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah the king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon had carried away. So, now we find that Mordecai, when he was carried away, it was during the time of Jeconiah the king of Judah. When Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came in and took Israelites into captivity. Mordecai at that time was a young boy, a young man, when he went into the captivity. Let's go more into this captivity. 2 Kings 24, verse 4 to 15. And this is during the time Nebuchadnezzar came into Israel. And he carried away all Jerusalem, and all the princesses, and all the mighty men of valor. So the princesses were like the heads of each state, province, and lot. They were like the governors of Israel. And all the mighty men of valor. The mighty men of valor were the military unit, the soldiers. Even 10,000 captives, and all the craftsmen and smiths. But none remained save the poorest sort of the people in the land. And he carried away Jehoiakim to Babylon, and the king's mother and the king's wives, and his officers, and the mighty of the land, those carried into captivity from Jerusalem, Babylon. Now, when it says the mighty of the land, is that the king of Babylon, when he raided Israel, when he took the captive, he took the ones that were skillful. He took the skilled workers who were skillful in craftsmanship and in iron and welding. He also took the military, Israelites military of Judah. And he took their wives. And he took their children. And he took their children's children. He also took the princesses, who were the governors. He took the king's officers and their wives and their children. So basically, the other nation, when they come into another man's land in captivity, they usually take the royal family, the heads of states and their families, the skillful men and their families, but they leave the poor, the average man, in the land. Because why? If you don't have no skills, if you don't have any type of higher level understanding, if you cannot produce, what do? They leave you in your own land. Just like in this country today. Babylon today have a history of going to other nations and bringing engineering into this country. They bring high tech from other countries into this country to what? To help build this country. Our forefathers that were taken into captivity here were skillful men and women. Because we were the one that what? Built this country. But unfortunately, those who didn't have certain skills remained back into their own land. And this is how the other nations operate. As you can see here, when Babylon came in, he took only the royal family and the skillful workers and the military. And when you do that, you do what? You weaken the nation. All right? So now let's continue. Back to the book of Esther, the 2nd chapter, verse 7. And he, this is referring to Mordecai, brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter. For she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. Okay? Mordecai took his younger cousin, as a young man, Esther, whose Hebrew name was Hadassah, for his own. Now, the reason her name is Esther is because, when you go into another nation captivity, what do? They change your name. They change the name. The same thing that they did to Daniel. They changed his name. Same thing they did his brothers. They changed their name. So we know we're in captivity because when we came here, what did they do? They changed our name. But Esther, Hebrew name was Hadassah. Okay? And she had no mother and father. So you got to ask yourself, well, what happened to them? How did they die? Remember, when Babylon came and raided Jerusalem and the nation Israel, there were a high level of Israelite casualties. A lot of Israelites did die during this captivity. And she lost both of her parents. So now Mordecai, who's from the royal family, was taken away, and Hadassah, to another man's land. Mordecai was useful to Babylon. The whole family, because that's why they took him. You had to be skillful, and you had to come from the royal family. You couldn't stay in your regular nation, with the skills that you had, because what the other nation are afraid of? That you will build yourself back up again and rise up against them. That's the thought usually. But anyhow, let's move on. Now, Mordecai taking Esther for his own is a law that the Most High gave the children of Israel. All right? When he says, take care of the widow and the fatherless. Let's go into it for a bit. These are the laws of the widow and the fatherless. When you go into the book of Deuteronomy, one verse says, he doeth execute the judgment of the fatherless and the widow, and loveth the stranger, and giveth him food and raiment. When you go into the book of Jeremiah, it's emphasized again. If you oppress not the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, and shed not innocent blood in this place, neither walk after other gods to your hurt. That's another commandment. When you go into the book of Esdras, the 2nd chapter, verse 20, do right to the widow, judge for the fatherless, give to the poor, defend the orphan, and clothe the naked. So Mordecai, as a young man, understood that was a law, that was a commandment that the Most High gave his forefathers. That if there are any amongst you who are fatherless or motherless, that you should take them in. Because Israel went through many wars. And through these wars that Israelites went through, there was a lot of casualty where a lot of men died. You know, those men had children, and a lot of these children became fatherless. So it was up to the family and the nation to do what? Take care of the widow and the orphans and the fatherless. And that's a commandment. Okay, let's move on. Now, we're going to go into Shushan, the palace. All right? This is in Persia. This is Persian, during Persian captivity. Okay? Let's read. Esther, the 2nd chapter. So it came to pass, when the king commandment, his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together into Shushan, the palace, to the custody of Haggai, that Esther was brought also into the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. Now, just give a little backdrop. In the prior chapter, the king, Ahasuerus, that was his name, he had a queen. The queen dishonored the king, where the king had to put her away. But every king got to have a queen, because a king is not a king without a queen. So he made a commandment, a decree for his servants to go find him another queen. And this is where Esther, the maiden, had gotten favor to his servant Haggai. Okay? Now, Haggai was the keeper of the women in Shushan. Verse 9. And the maiden, Esther, pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification, with such things as belonging to her. And 7 maidens, which were meant to be given to her, out of the king's house, and he preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the women. So this keeper of the woman, Haggai, saw Esther, and Esther pleased him. She was gorgeous to him. So he figured that Esther was the perfect fit out of all the other women that was brought to them throughout Shushan to be the king's queen. Okay? So basically, it's like in today, we have what you call a beauty pageant. You know, different nations, this country, other nations have what they call a beauty pageant, where they do a process of elimination for the most beautiful woman in the world. And Esther was chosen by these guys, Haggai. But you know, this is nothing new under the sun. Okay? Including our Benjamite land, they have Miss Caribbean. Okay? As you can see, you see 2 gentlemen. One of them represent Haggai and the other one represent his servant. Those are the men that did these beauty pageant For who? For the rulers. For the glory of the rulers. Of course, the women loved this opportunity. It pleased them. But this is the process that Esther had to go through in order to be accepted by Haggai and to be presented to the king. Nothing new under the sun, beloved. Beauty pageant was something that was done during the old times by the other nations. Okay? Let's continue. Now, Esther's 2nd chapter, verse 10-11. Esther had not shown her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she would not show it. And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the woman's house to know how Esther did and what should become of her. So, now, Mordecai is walking throughout the palace. Not everyone can roam around the palace. Meaning that Mordecai has some kind of influence or a position within the palace of Shushan for him to be walking around and making sure Esther was okay. Now he told Esther not to mention to anyone that you are a Jew, that you are an Israelite. Don't even mention to our own people. Because why? They will give you up. So Esther had to keep her identity while being in the palace, a secret. And that's what Mordecai told her to do, to protect herself. And he's still worried about her. Okay? But also you will find that there were not any physical communication between Esther and Mordecai during the time when she was in the palace. That's it. Mordecai did not see her physically. So we're going to find out how they communicated with each other. Okay? So let's move on. We're going to go Esther, the 2nd chapter, verse 21-22. And in those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, 2 of the king's chamberlains, Bacthai and Teresh, of those which kept the door, were wroth and sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. Verse 22. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen. And Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. So, Mordecai was at the gate. During the time of Persian captivity, during that time of a gate was like an office, a position within the palace. In our time, we call a gate a regular fence, and people just hang around the gate. No, Mordecai wasn't doing that. He wasn't around the palace just hanging out and walking around and not doing nothing. He did have a position there. He had a person inside where he could send messages to Esther in the form of communication. But while doing his office in the palace, he come across 2 men, 2 guards, 2 high-profile men who was planning an assassination against the king. When he was able to understand their plot, he was able to send that message to Esther, and Esther was able to get that message to the king. As the story progresses, that plan of the assassination attempt has been foiled. When the king Ahasuerus was able to find it out, he got both men killed. Okay? Let's move on. Now, let's go to the book of Esther, chapter 3. Now, after the king killed the two men. Then we have Haman. All right, let's read verse 1. After these things did King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. So the king gave this Agagite the highest position in Shushan. That means he was in charge of all the governors that controlled the territory for the king. Okay? Haman was what you would call the Secretary of State. Haman was what you call the Secretary of Defense, the Chief Commander. He was given that position. But then we find that Haman also is from the lot of Amalek. He's an Amalekite. All right, let's go back and find the history between Israel and Amalekites. When we go into 1 Samuel, the 15th chapter, 7 and 8, we know that Haman, let's say he was a Gagite. So let's go who are the Gagites. 1 Samuel chapter 15. And Saul, King Saul, smote the Amalekites from Havilah until thou comest to Shur, that is over against Egypt. And he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites. So at the time, when Saul was king, he went to war with the Amalekites. Agag was his name, was the king of the Amalekites. Okay? So when it said that Haman was a Agagite, Haman came from the family of Agag, the king of an Amalekite. So he was of the Amalek stock. Okay? His forefather was Edom. So he was an Edomite. Let's continue. But Saul and the people spared Agag the king, and the best of the sheep, and of the oxen, and of the flatlings, and of the lambs, and all that was good, and would not utterly destroy them, but everything that was vile, and refused that they destroy utterly. They refused to destroy utterly. Excuse me. So, basically, the Most High had given Saul the commandment that when you go to war against the Amalekites, against King Agag, you must smote King Agag, smote their children, their wives, the whole clan, and do not take their spoil. Destroy all their spoils, meaning destroy the cattle, destroy all the lambs, destroy all the oxen. Don't take any of their spoils. But Saul, all right, when you read, Saul and the people of Israel spared Agag. So they did not kill the king as they were commanded, and the best of the sheep, and of the oxen, and of the fatlings, and of the lambs, and all that was good, they kept for themselves, and would not utterly destroy them. Everything that was vile to the Most High, and they refused that they should destroy utterly. So they broke the commandment, they didn't destroy everything. Okay? This is when Saul told the Most High, well, the people told me not to take the spoils. Saul had blamed it on the people. But the Most High said, destroy everything of the Amalekites. Okay? Now, you gotta ask a question. Why destroy the lamb, the oxen, all the cattle, why not keep it? Now here's what I think the reason is. The Most High gave Israel dietary laws, right? Israel is supposed to eat certain animal, clean animal, okay? But what makes the animal clean is what they eat. Israelites were farmers. The stock, the cattle, the oxen, what they eat? They ate grass. Okay? That's all they eat. But the other nation, they don't take care of the animals the same way Israelites did. The other nations will give their stock, their animal, their cattle, rats, corn, GMO, okay? They don't give them grass. They give them all the foul food to eat. The other nations don't care. And it's the same thing that's happening today. The meat that we get from the supermarket are fed a lot of GMO, which is not a healthy thing for the animal. And then when we eat it, we also are defiling ourselves and our bodies. The best thing to do is eat stock, cattle, lamb that's been what? Grass fed. Because with the grass, you get the better nutrients. But with the GMO, you're getting that GMO in your body, and this is the thing that's making us sick. The Most High set up the dietary law perfectly. But because we're in captivity, we don't have knowledge and understanding, especially of what we eat. So that's why he told Saul, destroy all the cattle. Don't give it to the Israelites. They're defiled. Destroy their ox, destroy their lamb. Because what? The Amalekites don't take care of this animal the way an Israelite would take care of the animal. But Saul didn't take heed. He broke that commandment. Let's continue on. Now, then, 1 Samuel 15, then came the word to the Lord unto Samuel, saying, it repenteth me that I have set up Saul to be a king, for he is turned back from following me, and had not performed my commandments. And it grieved Samuel, and he cried unto the Lord all night. Okay? Samuel was grieved. Because what? Saul did not kill the king. Saul took all the Amalekites' spoils and cattle, and did not do the commandment of the Most High. Well, why was Samuel so grieved? Samuel made intercessions and plead with the Most High. No. Move on. Let me show why Samuel grieved. Verse 15, 32. And then Samuel, bring ye hither to me Agag the king of the Amalekites. And Agag came unto him delicately, meaning that they were not treating him like a prisoner. Okay? Chances are they fed him, the best food. They gave him the best jail quarters. He was not treated as a prisoner or a captive. Let's read on. And Agag came unto him delicately, and Agag said, surely the bitterness of death is past. So he thinks that he's going to be spared, that Samuel is going to let him go. Verse 33. And Samuel said, as thy sword had made women childless, so shall thy mother be childless amongst women. And Samuel hewed Agag in pieces before the Lord in Gilgal. This is what was grieving Samuel. Because Saul did not do the command that the Most High told him to do. Right? Because Samuel's the one that went to Saul and said, hey, listen, The Most High says, when you go to war with the Amalekites, you're supposed to utterly destroy everything, the king, the cattle. But Saul did not take heed. So now it's up to Samuel, the priest. He had to go finish what Saul couldn't finish. And this is what was grieving him. Samuel had to go and cut the king of the Amalekites, Agag, into pieces. Agag was Haman's great-grandfather. So Haman was from the lineage of Agag, the Agagite. So we know there was a war history between Israel and the Agagites. Now let's move on. Esther 3. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bow and reverence Haman, the Agagite. For the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai, the Jew, bowed not, nor did he reverence. Then the king's servants, which were in the king's gate, said unto Mordecai, Why transgress thou the king's command? So, being that Haman was the top man of the Persian kingdom, everyone had to give him reverence. Wherever he goes, wherever he walks, everybody have to do what? Bow. That was the culture at that time. But Mordecai, the Benjamite, didn't bow at all. Okay? Mordecai, the Benjamite, did not give Agag any type of reverence, any type of honor. He refused to bow. A Benjamite don't bow. Okay? Let us continue. Esther, the 3rd chapter, we continue. Now it came to pass, when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. So the men at the gates couldn't understand why Mordecai didn't bow. But Mordecai said, I am a Jew. I am a Benjamite and I am a Jew from the stock of Israel. We don't bow to no man like Haman. He's an Amalekite. So these men, when it's told, give this message to Haman the Agagite. Verse 5. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. So he was angry. That's it. His heart became angry. Okay? Now. Verse 6. And he taught scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had shown him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. So, the men at the gates, who, of course, will bow down to Haman every time he come, told him his people, who were the Jews in the province. Okay? This is the reason why Mordecai told Esther not to reveal who you are and what stock you come from, what lineage, what background you come from. Okay? Mordecai is very intelligent. He knew somebody would give her away. Just as these guys just told Haman who were Mordecai's people in the land of Shushan. Okay? Let's read on. Verse 7. Now in the first month, That is in the month of Nisan. So this is the first month of the year. All right, it's called Nisan in Persia. In the 20th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur. Okay, they cast Pur. That is the lot before Haman from day to day, from month to month, to the 12th month. That is the month of Adar. Okay. I'd like to take a little moment and explain this. Okay. Let's go back. Verse 7 saying, the first month, that is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur. That is Lot. Now, casting Pur and Lot is what? Now, we've been taught so many different things about casting lots. Okay, where we've heard that where men take a bunch of rocks and toss them, casting lots. Just like, you know, and today when you go into our Israelite neighborhoods, you see young men in the street corners rolling dice. So they say that's casting lots. But is that really what our forefather did? Because when you look, it says, in the first month, the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they, that means the king and his council, they cast Pur, that is lots, before Haman from day to day. That means Haman was there, right? Haman was there from day to day. So they was having monthly meetings, daily meetings about what? Okay? From day to day, from month to month, to the 12th month, that is the month of Adar. So Haman, the king, and his subjects were having monthly or weekly meeting day to day from the first year to the end of the year. And they were casting lots. So you got to ask yourself, were all these high-level king, commanders, and governors were in a room throwing dice and throwing rocks, making decisions? No, I don't believe so. In this context, casting lots or casting the lot can be what? A voting system. They were dealing with a matter. They was dealing with a situation. They were observing the whole region of Shushan, and they was making decisions. And how should they do what? Run the people. For us, it was like they was having a meeting about gentrification. How do we divide all these providences amongst the people? So they was making decisions, casting lots. It was like a voting system. Okay? Every man has his point, but then the king, okay, will have every man vote, and that he would choose. Maybe he would pull something out of a hat, then he would cast lot. He would choose based on the discussion. If there was like a draw on voting on a matter, okay, I pray that y'all getting this understanding. Now, even today we see it. Our rulers and our leaders, when they sit down at a table, what are they doing? They are having meetings, and they are, well, somebody call it plotting, or somebody call that they're doing some form of figuring a way how to gentrify their providences, how we separate it, how do we build, how do we do everything, and they make decisions, and they have a voting process. They sit down, they have a feast, they eat dinner while they discuss the matter of the nation. But then, during the discussion, a vote has to be done, right? When you're with a group of people, you have to vote on a particular issue. Now, suppose the voting becomes a tie. Then what? The head, the king, the commander-in-chief, the president, does what? He the one who comes with the final vote. But for him, if he's confused, what he'll do is he'll put everyone's vote in a hat. And then what he probably do is say, you know what, whatever I choose, whatever lot been cast is what the law will become. And that's what will be. Okay? Casting lots per. It was a voting system, we believe. You know, this is something that was done, 2,000 years ago? But now we change it, and, we think about rolling dices, and, it just doesn't make any sense. Okay? Let's move on. Now, during this meeting of casting lots, where they're sitting and voting and discussing the matters of the nation, okay, Haman is at the meeting. Let's read Esther 3:8. And Haman said unto the king Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces. So now you can understand what they're talking about. They're talking about the providence. Now Haman knows that, wait a minute, there are a group of people, Israelites, Jews, that are scattered amongst the providences. In the Persian captivity, it wasn't only Israelites. There were Babylonians. There were also people of Assyrians. Okay? And they were all Persians, all under the Persian kingdom. You have mixed multitude, almost like here in our current situation. You have different nations of people dwelling in this land. Each have their own community. Each have their own providences. For those in the New York area, in certain boroughs, there's a certain group of people that lives in certain areas. Like the borough of Brooklyn. We know there's a Judite community, which we will call Bedford-Stuyvesant. But there's gentrification going on. Our rulers were casting lots to see how can we change a certain neighborhoods that have majority Judite in Bed-Stuy and bring other nations into this neighborhood. How do we push them out? We know in certain areas there's a high level of Benjamites in one area. There's certain areas there are Levites. If you go in like East Harlem, New York, you have a large population of what? Issachar, Northern Kingdom. Okay? Nothing new under the sun. So Haman is in this meeting, and because he has such a hatred for the Israelite Jews, right? He brings them up to the king. Let's continue reading. 8. And Haman said unto the king Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people. So he's saying that this group of people have their own laws. Everybody else is following your law, but this group of Jews, Israelites, are not really following your laws. Right? So Haman brings this up. Continue. Their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep they the king's law. Therefore, it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. Oh, so now he exposing them. He said, don't you think the king should do something about it? Don't you think the king should put a yoke on a group of people who are not following his law? Now, how come the king don't know this? Why does he need a person like Haman to bring this understanding of who are the group of people in a kingdom that he's running? You're the king. You're the king. Okay? No, now what does he do? The king don't have no idea of Israelites, Jews in his kingdom. Verse 9. He says, if it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of business, and bring it to the king's treasury. And the king took his ring from his hand, and he gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. So, Haman made a petition to the king. He said, look, there's a group of Israelites that are not following your laws. They have their own laws. We have to deal with them wisely. So Haman is bringing what? A crafty counsel against Israelites in Persia. But the king had no idea of who the Jews are, Israel. All the king knows is he inherited the kingdom through his father. He just became king, and he just got to just sign laws and decree. The only thing that this king worries about is, one, an assassination attempt. This king worries about other nations coming and going to war with him, overpowering him. And he worries about losing a queen. I think those are the only three things that this king thinks about. All other matters is the job of the governors and the princes is to bring it to the king, and he writes the signature. This king cannot be thinking about what nation or people or tribe that are in the kingdom. That's the job of his princesses. He just got to worry about three things: assassination attempt, a war, and losing a wife, or losing a queen. Let's continue. And in verse 10, and the king took his ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and the Jews' enemy. Let's move on. Now we're going to jump to Esther chapter 4, the fourth chapter. Now when Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes, and he put on sackcloth with ashes, and he went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and a bitter cry, and came even before the king's gate, for some might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. Let's read Esther, the third chapter, 9, 1 through 10. And he says, if it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have charge of this business. So, Haman is making an offer to the king. It is almost like a lobbyist. What do lobbyists do in our present day time? They go to our senators, our rulers, and they give them certain type of how can I say it? They give them funds for their campaign. They offer them funds for their campaign to do what? to make policies and rules for their own purposes, for their businesses' purposes. Okay? We have other understanding about what a lobbyist does, according to the scripture that will be coming pretty soon. But Haman, on the other hand, is making this offer to the king that if you write this policy where we can destroy these people, the Israelites, the Jews, I will pay for it. I will pay to enforce it, and I will even put money for your treasury. Now the king, as we know, he's going to accept the offer. It's a lot easier for him to accept the finances from Haman than for him to go in front of a council and ask for funds to enforce a rule and a policy to destroy a group of people, our forefathers, the Israelites. So Haman is making it easier for the king. So then what happens? The king decides what? And we continue. He says to bring it into the king's treasury. And the king took his ring from the hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. So the king acquiesced. Okay, now he giving Haman all power to enforce the decree that he's going to pass for all Jews to be destroyed. And this happened when? The 12th month of the year, during the month of Adar, on the 13th day. That's when this policy was signed and the king gave the ring to Haman. Okay? Let's go on. Next, Esther, 4th chapter, verse 1 and 2. And Mordecai perceived all that was done. Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and cried with a loud and bitter cry. Verse 2. And came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth and ashes. So, soon as our forefather Mordecai heard about the decree, he got word of the decree. Okay? He ripped up the garment that he had and did what? And put on sackcloth and ashes. Okay? As a form of what? As a form of protest. When we hear that Israelites used to put on sackcloth and ashes, during them days, that was them making a stand as a form of protest. He couldn't get into, it says here, it says, verse 2, and it came even before the king's gate. So they all came in front of the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. Okay? So there was no way Mordecai could come back inside the palace dressed with sackcloth and ashes all over the body. Yes, that was those days. That was a form of protest and standing up for standing up against a particular policy that the rulers would pass. It has not changed. If you look on today, or even our past history here in Babylon, you had different groups, different organizations who would make stand and protest for a particular purpose against certain type of policies. You know, You had Southern Kingdom, you know. You have a group like the Black Panther Party. You have groups like Move, all the different kind of groups. You even got groups in the continent of Africa, South Africa, who would get together as one group, as a nation, to stand against a political decree. You have many groups. Okay? You had Southern Kingdom and Northern Kingdom. Okay? And then in the past you had Northern Kingdoms, like the Young Lord, you know, the Gadites. All in this country would take a stand against any policy that's going to affect their community and their people. So during the time of Mordecai and Esther, or during the time of Israelites, we would all wear sackcloth and have ashes as a way of standing against our rulers, crying out loud. Okay? Alright, so let's move on. Esther 4, 9 to 13. And Hatak came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. So Mordecai sent a message to Esther on what had happened, what decree has passed, whereas Haman have power now to destroy all the Jews. Okay, that was in Shushan. Verse 10. And again, Esther spake unto Hatak, and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. And they told to Mordecai Esther words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house, more than all the Jews. Okay, so two things is going on here. Number one, we see that Esther sent her servant Hatak. Hatak was Esther's servant and also Mordecai. He was the messenger between them. Because remember, before, Mordecai could not physically communicate Esther as the queen. That was all over. Okay? Because Mordecai told her not to expose her identity. Because if they communicate, then what? Haman would pick up that she is a Jew. Okay? So Haman have no idea that Esther is a Jew. But he knows Mordecai is a Jew. And the only way that Mordecai would be able to communicate with Esther through Hatak. He was going back and forth. He was almost like a telephone. He was the messenger. Now the second thing, Mordecai has said to her in verse 13, that Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house, more than all the Jews. So he's communicating to Esther that just because you're in the palace, just because you're the queen, doesn't mean that this destruction, this massacre that they're planning is not going to affect you. It's not going to come to you. Because somebody on the inside might expose you. Okay? That's what Mordecai sent. That was the message that Mordecai sent to Esther. Alright? Let's move on. Esther, the 4th chapter, verse 15, 17. That Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. Now Esther is giving Hatak a message back to Mordecai. And she says, go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and I will go into the house into the king. I will go into the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. Oh, now Esther sends a message to Mordecai and said, okay, have everyone fast for 3 days. Okay? Fast. Do not eat and drink. While in your sackcloth and ashes, fast. And fasting is the most powerful thing that we can do, especially as an Israelite. Alright? When you go in the New Testament, Yeshua Mashiach said it. When the disciples couldn't heal and cast out the demons out of the people, what Christ said? Fasting and praying. Fasting and praying. Fasting is a very powerful thing that we must do. Okay? But you notice here, what we're learning from the book of Esther is that the power of fasting is greater when it is done as a nation. That's what we're going to learn here. Because Mordecai had to get the whole nation of Israel, all the Jews had to do what? Fast. Fast and pray. No eating, no drinking. And even Esther had her maidens, her servant, do the same thing. Everyone is working in what? In one accord. Okay? Because during the time of, whether it be the 60s, 70s, yeah, we will go out and protest, cry out loud, spare not, against the injustices of the system. But a lot that we miss as a nation is what? Fasting and praying. Fasting and praying. So all praises for this understanding, because now we as Israelites, we could wake up to this understanding and teach all our people that one of the strongest things that you can do is fasting and praying. Next. So, verse 17. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Okay? So now, this is where the Most High intervened. Okay? This is where during that time, Israel is going to get some form of salvation. Okay? Because Mordecai and the Jews put on sackcloth and ashes and began fasting and praying, now we're going to see how the Most High intervene. This is the God of Israel intervention. We read Esther the 6th chapter. On that night could not the king sleep. So it's saying the king cannot sleep that evening. Okay? And he commanded to bring the book and records of the chronicles. And they read before the king. So we know that the king had trouble sleeping. When the Most High comes and visits you, especially all the kings that we read through our records, that he came to them in what? Dreams. He comes and pricked their spirit with dreams. So King Ahasuerus was really pricked. He couldn't sleep that night. It just wasn't in him. We continue reading. And he commanded to bring the book of the records of the chronicles. And they read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigahana and Cheres, two of the king's chamberlains, the keeper of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. Okay? So now the king is getting this understanding. Okay? Because during the time when that happened, the king don't know who revealed this assassination plot. All he had to do was act real fast and say, oh, somebody's trying to assassinate me. Get them, smite them, and he kills them off. That's it. But now, it's written in the writings of the king that Mordecai was the man that was able to give that information. So then what happened? Let's move. That's the 6th. And Haman, okay, so now, after this, what happened was the king wanted to honor the man who gave him the information of the assassination attempt. He wanted to honor Mordecai as the story progresses. The Haman came in, alright, and he asked Haman, how do I honor the man? How do I honor a man? Right? This is Haman's answer. Esther 6. And Haman answered the king, for the man who the king delighted to honor, let the royal apparel be bought with the king used to wear, and the horse that the king ride upon, and the royal crown which set upon his head. So the king asks Haman, how can I honor a man who did a righteous act for me? Haman, thinking that the king is referring to himself. The king is referring to himself. Haman thinks he's referring to himself. That he says to the king, well, let him wear your garment. Let him ride the horse that you ride, O king. And let him put on the crown that you put on. That was Haman's answer, thinking that the king was referring to him, that he was going to be honored by the king. Okay? But in the king's mind, he's speaking of who? Mordecai, the Benjamite Jew. Okay? But then after that, after the story progresses, we go Esther. Esther comes to the king and make a petition. Now let's read. So the king and Haman came to the banquet with Esther the queen. And the king said again unto Esther on the 2nd day at the banquet of wine, what is thy petition? And the queen Esther, and it shall be granted unto thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of the kingdom. So Queen Esther went and made a petition to the king. Okay, she's planning a banquet because kings and rulers, they love feasting, they love banquets. So she want to honor her king by having a banquet and inviting Haman to the banquet. Then Esther the queen answered and said, if I have favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. So Esther right now is, is opening herself to the king and telling him who she really is, who are her people. She's pleading to the king and telling the history of her being an Israelite that was captured that was put on captivity. The king had no knowledge of that. The king did not know she was a Jew. Okay? Remember, the king did not have any knowledge that they were Israel. They know they were Israelite in the land, but did not know that the people that Mordecai had forced him to sign a petition against were of his queen Esther stock. It was Queen Esther's people, the Jew, the Israelite. The king had no knowledge. Okay? So Esther makes this petition and tells the king her background information, unaware. Esther 7. Then the king, Ahasuerus, answered and said unto Esther the queen, well, who is he? And there he is, and where is he that does presume in his heart to do so? So the king asks, well, who is it? Who's doing this? Who's the one that's trying to destroy you and your people, my queen? And Esther said, the adversary and the enemy is the wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. So Esther exposed Haman at that banquet, who he is and what he was planning to do. She exposed him. Now, after that, the king was very angry. The king had honored Mordecai and did give Mordecai, as you read the story progressive, a crown, the robe, and a horse to walk on. To ride on. Now, let's go to Esther 8. And they read on. On that day did the king Ahasuerus gave the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, unto Esther the queen. And Mordecai came before the king, and Esther had told what he was unto her. So now, the king who had honored Mordecai, gave him his crown, gave him his robe, gave him his horse to ride, finds out that Mordecai is related to his queen, to his wife. Okay? Continue on. Verse 2. And the king took his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. Now, power has been given to who? Mordecai. Haman was stripped of his power, his position, by the king. And it was given to who? Mordecai. Okay? Let's continue. Now that Mordecai is in this position, let's go. Verse 9. Then were the king's scribes called at that time in the 3rd month, that is, the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day thereof, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews. Now Mordecai is writing policies, writing decrees. He's in a position of power now. He's going to reverse everything that was set against his people, the Israelites. Let's continue. Okay, it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants, and the deputies, and the rulers of the provinces which are from India into Ethiopia, and 127 provinces. See that? That's how much land, countries that the Persian rulers were conquering. they had the control of. Now they're giving this power to who? An Israelite Jew from the tribe of Benjamin, Mordecai. As we continue, in the middle of the same verse, and it to be lieutenants and deputies and rulers of the provinces which are from India unto Ethiopia, in 127 provinces. So Persia controlled 120 countries during that time. That's big, that's huge. According to the writing thereof, and unto every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writing, according to their language. So, with all the countries that the Persian ruled over, each group of people had their own language. Okay, the same thing we see here in this country. You have Israelites. I will speak English. You have Benjamites with English dialect. You have Levites with French and Creole dialects. You have Northern Kingdom with Spanish dialects. So everybody had their own language. And you notice that when senators, the senators and city councilmen, when they're sending letters of what's going to change in the community, they put them in different languages to reach the particular people that they're communicating to. You know? So it was the same thing we're seeing here. Mordecai, being in position of power, made sure that every different nation who speak a different language would understand the new policies that he's putting in place, including the Israelites, that he will write to them in Hebrew. That's the 8th chapter, verse 12. Upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely, upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. That's what we're in right now today. In this month of February, is during that time was the 12th month Adar. The copy of the writing for a commandment to be given to every province was published. So the decree was sealed unto all the people, and that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. Mordecai wrote a policy reversing the judgment that was placed on Israelites when Haman was in position of power. So now, since Mordecai is in position of power, switch everything. Now the Israelites could have vengeance against the Amalekites, against all the other nations that was against them for during that period of time. The irony is, we see our forefather Mordecai, the Benjamite, in a high position now, is doing what? He is restoring, right? Restoring the position that his forefathers, King Saul, could not do against the Amalekites. Okay? We're going to see. Esther 9. And in Shushan, the palace, the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. And these men were loyal to Haman. Okay? The 10 sons of Haman, the sons of Hamatadah, the enemy of the Jews, slew they. So Haman had his sons also part of his cabinet, and the Jews slew them, killed his whole family, his sons and himself. Mordecai reversed that judgment and took vengeance against the Amalekites, the Gagites. Here, verse 10. The 10 sons of Haman, the son of Amatha, the enemy of the Jews, slew they. But on the spoil laid they not their hands. Remember Saul? He was commissioned to go and smite the Gagite king and his people totally, including their spoils, their lamb, their cattle. Here we have the same thing here. Mordecai went against and destroyed all of the Amalekites, the Gagite, Agag, Haman's family, their spoils, their riches, all their resources. They did not touch. They did not keep from themselves. They destroyed that too. Mordecai is fulfilling what his forefather Saul did not do or couldn't do. Follow me, read again. The 10 sons of Haman, the sons of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, slew they, but on the spoil laid they not their hand. Israel did not touch any of their spoils. They destroyed that too. Verse 11. On that day, the number of those that were slain in Shushan, the palace, was brought before the king. Verse 15. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in a royal apparel of blue and white, and with the great crown of gold, and with the garment of linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. So now we see Mordecai has risen to the top, where he can do what? Help the Israelite, his people. Help the Jews. Change things around in this situation. They were in a situation that the enemies who hated them was going to massacre them. But with the queen and her cousin, or you could say father, the two had overcome this massacre. Okay? Verse 8. Then the Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor, and in every provinces and in every city, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day, and many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews that fell upon them. So now, Israel was so vigilant in taking a vengeance against the other nations that went up against them, that you had the common other Gentiles do what? They changed their identity to become what? Jews. A lot of them became what we call proselytes. A lot of the other nations become what? Servants to the Israelites while in Persia. Mordecai turned everything around. Okay? Read that last verse again. The ending of the last verse. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for they fear the Jews fell upon them. Okay. That's the verse 9. And as the day wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned into them from sorrow into joy. So during the month of Adar, the 12th month of the year, Haman had gotten the king to sign a decree which he petitioned to destroy the Israelites in Persia in all the provinces from India to Ethiopia. That was done in the 12th month. So now, Mordecai in position of power made that day and that month a joyful event instead of a sorrowful event for the Israelites in Persia. As the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned into them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions one to another, and gift to the poor. This is how we honor this day, and we call it the Feast of Purim. Okay? Where we feast and give joy, and we send gifts to one another. All right? Israelites starts giving gifts to each other, and also to help those who were poor amongst them. Okay? And that's the whole purpose that, the Feast of Purim, this is how we should serve the Feast of Purim, is by giving gifts to one another, that we do every year, and which is a wonderful thing, But the only thing that I will mention and petition to all you Israelites that are out there who's going to recognize this Feast of Purim is, when you buy your gifts, let's give this some thought. When we go out and buy these gifts, let's try to buy it from other Israelites. Let's try to buy it from our people, these gifts, to give to someone else. Because this nation, they have what they call Christmas. We don't recognize Christmas. But what that Christmas holiday does is strengthen this society economic structure. Yeah. Babylon makes and generate a lot of money during holidays and holy days and Christmas days. So we as Israelites, if we're to celebrate and honor each other, honor our forefathers with the Feast of Purim, then we too should sort of like buy all our resources or victuals or gifts from each other by supporting Israelite businesses. We have a lot of brothers and sisters who are creating wonderful products, wonderful businesses. Let's support them. Okay? We have a few. I like to, share some of our Israelites that are doing great things that we should support. We have a sister here who has a catering business, an Israelite sister, who knows the dietary law, and you're going to be getting quality food, kosher food. Let's support her during Purim. Here's how you can reach her. Her information is up on the screen. Okay? IamKosher.co. Here you have another sister who sells different type of oil products for hair, facial product. Here's another way you can reach this sister and support her. If you want to give a gift to someone, reach out to this Israelite sister and support her. We have a family that have a farm who are producing products, who are producing cattle, you know you're going to get fresh food. Okay? They have fresh poultry. They're also producing wine, kosher wine. We got to support that. This is an Israelite family. So reach out to them and let's support them during this feast day. Let's honor them. We also have another Israelite brother, a Levite, who customized jewelry. Okay? Who customized jewelry. If you want to buy a gift, men, for your wife, a ring, or ladies, you want to buy a gift for your husband, and you're an Israelite, here, reach out to that brother. You can take his name down in Instagram, reach out to this brother. Very talented brother. A Levite from the nation of Israel. We also have a Northern Kingdom power couple who do what? Interior design, interior decorating. If you want to do some type of changes in your house, okay, you reach out to them. Okay? They do wonderful works. They are Israelites. That's amongst us. Also, we have another Israelite sister who's producing what? Kosher wine. Fresh. Wonderful. I even had some. Who make it out of fresh blackberries and different kind of berries. You can reach out to them right there on their Instagram. Okay, this is an Israelite company. We're doing some good works out there. Another Israelite sister, a Judite, will make a skin condition. All right, for the skin, radiant skin. If you're struggling with things like eczema, things like that, this product is excellent for it. You reach out to her, the Judite. And of course, we have this sister right here, an Israelite Levi sister, who have a car wash company, an app that she created, or owner, called Go Wash. Support that sister. We are doing this work out here, people, in the Israelite community. Let's try to keep, let's honor this feast by keeping this feast. If we're going to support each other, let's try to keep it in the family. Let's try to keep it amongst us, the Jews, the Israelite family. So, I thank you very much for this moment. Thank you for our Sabbath moment. I hope you guys enjoy your Feast of Purim. Okay, I hope this lesson or this understanding will enlighten you and give you a lot of understanding. If you have any questions, you can email us. That's scrolling down the screen. Go ahead, you can email us. Also, I'd like to give a special thanks to Jacob Heritage Church. This is a congregation where a few of us congregate. If you're in the Brooklyn area and on a Sabbath day at 2 o'clock in the East Flatbush area or anywhere, and if you speak Creole and you want to get some understanding about being a Hebrew Israelite culture, you could come. Located at 2801 Church Avenue, Brooklyn, New York. Okay, service begin 2 p.m. to sundown. So if you want more information, you can email me. Okay. Also, I'd like to give praise and thanks to Daughters of Zion for the music. When we open up, we're using the Lord's Prayer music. So wonderful music. I'd like to give a shout out to them, Daughters of Zion. All praises. So again, have a blessed Sabbath and enjoy your Feast of Purim. All right. So now I'm just gonna say